Fact 1. 4 directors, 1 chaotic movie. Most movies have one director who guides the entire production from start to finish, but Tango and Cash had 4 different people calling the shots at various points during filming. This unprecedented musical chairs of directors turned what should have been a straightforward buddy cop movie into one of Hollywood's most chaotic productions of the 1980s. The trouble began with the original director, Andrei Konchalovsky, a respected Russian filmmaker who had previously worked on serious dramas like Runaway Train. Konchalovsky wanted to make Tango and Cash a realistic, hard-hitting police thriller, but producer John Peters had very different ideas. Peters pushed for the movie to be goofier and more comedic, leading to constant creative battles between the two men. After nearly 3 months of filming, their relationship became so toxic that Peters fired Konchalovsky, even though most of the movie had already been shot. Peter MacDonald, who had worked as a second-unit director on Rambo 3 the year before, was the first replacement brought in to finish the remaining scenes. However, MacDonald's time in the director's chair was brief, and he was soon replaced by Albert Magnoli, who had previously directed Prince's Purple Rain. Magnoli ended up filming all the chase sequences and fight scenes in the movie's explosive finale, giving the film a noticeably different tone in its final act. But the director shuffle wasn't over yet. When the movie reached post-production, Warner Brothers studio executives were so unhappy with the first cut that they brought in Stuart Baird, a legendary editor known as a doctor who specialized in fixing troubled films. Baird essentially became the 4th director, completely re-editing the entire movie and restructuring scenes to try to make sense of the footage shot by 3 different directors. This behind-the-scenes chaos explains why Tango and Cash feels like several different movies mashed together, with tonal shifts that range from serious action drama to silly comedy, often within the same scene. The fact that the movie works at all is considered something of a miracle in Hollywood circles. Fact 2. Patrick Swayze chose Roadhouse instead. Patrick Swayze was originally signed to play Gabriel Cash, the rough-around-the-edges cop who would become Kurt Russell's signature role in the film. The casting of Swayze alongside Sylvester Stallone seemed like a perfect match on paper, bringing together 2 of the biggest action stars of the late 1980s for what was expected to be a major blockbuster. The original plan paired Stallone as the sophisticated, well-dressed Ray Tango with Swayze as his blue-collar counterpart Cash, creating an interesting dynamic between 2 very different types of leading men. Swayze had just come off his massive success in Dirty Dancing 2 years earlier and was at the height of his popularity, making him an ideal choice to match Stallone's star power in this buddy cop adventure. However, when another script landed on Swayze's desk around the same time, he faced a difficult decision between 2 very different projects. Roadhouse offered him the chance to play Dalton, a legendary bouncer who cleans up a rowdy bar in a small Missouri town. While Tango and Cash would have been a traditional two-hander where he shared screen time with another major star, Roadhouse gave Swayze the opportunity to carry an entire film as the undisputed lead character. Swayze ultimately chose to drop out of Tango and Cash to pursue the Roadhouse role, a decision that significantly altered both films' destinies. His departure left the producers scrambling to find a replacement who could match both Stallone's screen presence and the specific energy they needed for the Cash character. After considering several other actors, they settled on Kurt Russell, whose rugged charisma and natural comedy timing proved to be exactly what the role needed. Interestingly, both movies were released in 1989, with Roadhouse hitting theaters in May and Tango and Cash following in December. While Roadhouse became a cult classic that defined Swayze's tough guy persona, Russell's performance as Cash became one of his most quotable and beloved roles, proving that sometimes the right actor finds the right role through unexpected circumstances. Fact 3. Barry Sonnenfeld fired after 1 week. Barry Sonnenfeld was fired from Tango and Cash after working on the film for only 1 week, despite being one of the most talented cinematographers in Hollywood at the time. Sonnenfeld had already established himself as a master of visual storytelling through his work on critically acclaimed films like Raising Arizona, Big, and Blood Simple, making his sudden dismissal from the project particularly shocking to industry insiders. The problem arose from Sylvester Stallone's very specific demands about how he should appear on camera, particularly regarding the lighting that would make him look his best. Stallone had built his career on projecting a powerful, heroic image, and he was extremely particular about every visual detail that might affect how audiences perceived his character. When Sonnenfeld's lighting choices didn't meet Stallone's exacting standards for his appearance, tensions quickly escalated between the star and the cinematographer. Stallone felt that Sonnenfeld wasn't lighting him properly to showcase his best angles and create the dramatic visual impact he wanted for the Tango character. This wasn't simply about vanity, but rather Stallone's understanding that his physical presence was a crucial part of his star appeal, and he believed that the wrong lighting could undermine the character's effectiveness on screen. The firing happened so quickly that Sonnenfeld barely had time to establish his visual approach for the film before he was replaced. Stallone immediately brought in Donald E. Thorin, who had previously worked as cinematographer on Lockup, another Stallone film released earlier that same year. Thorin was already familiar with Stallone's preferences and requirements, having successfully lit the actor in ways that satisfied his demanding standards. This incident became part of the growing legend around Stallone's reputation for being extremely hands-on and controlling during film productions. While some viewed his behavior as difficult, others understood it as the natural result of a major star who had learned exactly what worked for his screen image and wasn't willing to compromise on those elements, even if it meant making unpopular decisions like firing respected crew members after just a few days of work. Fact 4. Brion James's fake Cockney expanded his role. Brion James was originally hired to play a minor villain named Requin with just 2 lines of dialogue, but his creative decision to speak in a terrible Cockney accent transformed his small part into one of the movie's most memorable supporting roles. James, who was best known for playing the replicant Leon in Blade Runner, understood that he needed to do something special to make his brief appearance stand out among the film's star-studded cast. When James arrived on set, he realized he was competing for screen time and audience attention with major stars like Sylvester Stallone, Kurt Russell, and Jack Palance, along with numerous other character actors who had much larger roles than his tiny part. Rather than simply deliver his 2 lines as written, James made the bold, creative choice to give his character a distinctive voice by speaking in what he later described as a horrible Cockney accent, even though the character had no established background requiring such a voice. James later explained his reasoning in interviews, saying that he was in a movie with all these major actors and needed to figure out how he was going to make his mark and chew the scenery alongside such established performers. His fake British accent was deliberately over-the-top and theatrical, sounding nothing like an authentic London Cockney, but creating exactly the kind of memorable villain voice that would stick in viewers' minds. Stallone was immediately charmed by James's creative choice and found the accent so entertaining that he decided to expand the character significantly during production. Instead of appearing in just 2 brief scenes, Requin became a major henchman with substantial dialogue and screen time throughout the movie, giving James the opportunity to develop the character's quirky personality and deliver several memorable lines in his distinctive fake accent. This spontaneous creative collaboration between James and Stallone shows how actors can sometimes influence their roles during filming when they bring unexpected ideas that enhance the overall production. James' willingness to take a creative risk with his voice work not only saved his small part from being forgettable, but turned it into one of the film's most quoted and recognizable supporting characters. Fact 5. Robert Zadars' face got him more screen time. Robert Zadar was originally cast to play a generic henchman character named Face, who was supposed to appear only in the movie's opening scene, and then disappear from the story completely. However, when Stallone and director Andrei Konchalovsky saw Zadar on set, they were so impressed by his distinctive physical appearance that they decided to give him a much larger role throughout the entire film. Zadar had an unusually large and angular jaw structure that made him instantly memorable on camera, creating the kind of striking villain look that action movies of the 1980s often featured. His imposing physical presence and unique facial features gave him a natural intimidation factor that made him perfect for playing memorable bad guys, even when he had very little dialogue to work with. The character's name, Face, was actually a reference to Zadar's most notable physical characteristic, and the filmmakers quickly realized they had stumbled upon someone whose appearance alone could make any scene more visually interesting. Rather than wasting such a distinctive look on a single scene, Stallone and Konchalovsky made the decision to expand the character's role and give face more opportunities to menace the heroes throughout the story. This spontaneous casting decision meant that Zadar ended up appearing in multiple scenes as one of the main villain's key enforcers, giving him significantly more screen time and dialogue than originally planned. His expanded role allowed him to become one of the film's most recognizable supporting antagonists, with his unusual appearance making him instantly memorable to audiences even decades after the movie's release. Zadar's experience on Tango and Cash demonstrates how sometimes an actor's natural physical characteristics can be just as important as their acting ability when it comes to creating memorable movie villains. The filmmaker's willingness to rewrite parts of their script to accommodate an actor whose look perfectly fit their vision shows how flexible productions can be when they discover unexpected talent, even in the smallest roles. This kind of on-the-spot casting expansion was fairly common in action movies of this era, where distinctive character actors were often given bigger parts if they brought something special to the screen during filming. Fact 6. Stallone's real glasses, not props. The glasses that Sylvester Stallone wears throughout the early scenes of Tango and Cash are not movie props created by the costume department, but rather his own personal prescription eyewear that he needed for his actual vision problems. This behind-the-scenes detail reveals something that most fans never knew about one of Hollywood's biggest action stars. Stallone has significant vision issues that he typically keeps hidden from audiences through the use of contact lenses. Stallone's prescription lenses show that he suffers from severe nearsightedness in one eye while having less serious vision problems in the other eye, creating an uneven visual condition that requires specially crafted glasses to correct properly. Additionally, he also deals with astigmatism, a common eye condition that causes blurred vision due to an irregularly shaped cornea, which adds another layer of complexity to his prescription requirements. Throughout most of his film career, Stallone has chosen to wear contact lenses instead of glasses when appearing on camera, allowing him to maintain the tough, unencumbered action hero image that became his trademark in movies like Rocky and Rambo. Contact lenses gave him the freedom to perform physical stunts and fight scenes without worrying about glasses falling off or breaking, while also preserving the visual aesthetic that audiences expected from his characters. However, for the character of Ray Tango, the sophisticated and intellectual police detective, glasses actually enhanced the character design by making him appear more scholarly and refined compared to his rough-and-tumble partner Cash. Rather than having the props department create fake glasses for the role, Stallone simply used his own prescription eyewear, which provided the authentic look the character needed while also giving the actor clear vision during filming. This practical decision demonstrates how sometimes the most authentic details in movies come from real life rather than elaborate costume design. The fact that Stallone was comfortable revealing his actual vision problems through his character shows a level of vulnerability that contrasts with his typically invincible screen persona, adding an unexpected layer of realism to his performance as the more cerebral half of the buddy cop duo. Fact 7. Released same day as Steven Spielberg's Always. Tango and Cash was released on December 22, 1989, the exact same day that Steven Spielberg's romantic drama Always hit theaters across America. This unusual scheduling coincidence meant that two completely different types of movies were competing directly against each other on what would become one of the final movie release dates of the entire 1980s decade. The timing of this dual release created an interesting contrast for moviegoers during the busy holiday season, as they could choose between Stallone and Russell's explosive buddy cop action comedy or Spielberg's heartfelt story about a deceased pilot who returns as a spirit to help his girlfriend move on with her life. Always starred Richard Dreyfuss, Holly Hunter, and John Goodman in a remake of the 1943 film A Guy Named Joe, representing the kind of sophisticated, emotional storytelling that Spielberg was known for throughout his career. Both films carried significant expectations from their respective studios, with Tango and Cash representing Warner Brothers' attempt to capitalize on the popular buddy cop genre that had been successful throughout the decade, while Always was expected to continue Spielberg's streak of both critical and commercial successes. The December 22nd release date was strategically chosen to take advantage of the holiday movie season. when families and couples would be looking for entertainment during their time off from work and school. This shared release date made both movies part of a unique piece of cinema history, as they became among the very last American films to reach theaters before the end of the 1980s. The decade had been defined by big-budget action spectacles, high-concept comedies, and Spielberg's family-friendly adventures, making it fitting that the final releases would include both an over-the-top action comedy and a Spielberg drama. The box office competition between these two very different films provided an interesting test of audience preferences during the holiday season, with moviegoers able to choose between the loud, explosive entertainment of Tango and Cash or the quieter, more emotional experience offered by Always on the Same Weekend. Fact 8. Jackie Chan. Stunt sequence borrowed and returned. The spectacular scene where Ray Tango faces down an oncoming truck with nothing but his pistol was directly borrowed from Jackie Chan's 1985 action film Police Story, where Chan himself performed the dangerous stunt without any stunt doubles. This borrowing of action sequences between films created an unexpected connection between Hollywood and Hong Kong cinema that would continue for years after Tango and Cash was released. In the original Police Story sequence, Jackie Chan's character stands directly in the path of a speeding truck and fires his weapon at the windshield, causing the vehicle to crash and stop just before hitting him. The Tango and Cash version recreates this same basic setup, with Stallone's character performing a similar feat of bravery and marksmanship to stop criminals who are trying to escape in a large truck. What makes this borrowing particularly interesting is that Jackie Chan noticed the homage to his work and decided to respond in kind when he made Police Story 3: Super Cop in 1992. Chan deliberately included a scene that referenced the makeshift zipline prison escape sequence from Tango and Cash, creating a playful back-and-forth exchange of stunt ideas between the two different film industries. This cross-pollination of action sequences demonstrates how filmmakers from different countries and cultures were watching each other's work and borrowing the most exciting elements for their own movies. Chan was known throughout his career for being generous about sharing his stunt innovations, and was often flattered when other filmmakers paid tribute to his work by recreating his most dangerous and spectacular sequences. The exchange between Police Story and Tango and Cash represents an early example of the growing influence that Hong Kong action cinema was having on Hollywood productions during the late 1980s and early 1990s. Action directors and choreographers were beginning to study Chan's techniques and incorporate his approach to practical stunts and creative set pieces into big-budget American films, creating a cross-cultural dialogue through the language of spectacular action sequences. Fact 9. Jack Palance complained on late-night TV. Jack Palance publicly aired his frustrations about his experience making Tango and Cash during an appearance on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno in 1992, revealing some surprising behind-the-scenes details that showed just how chaotic the production had become. Palance, who was known for his intimidating screen presence and professional approach to filmmaking, rarely complained about his work publicly, making his candid comments about the film particularly noteworthy. During his appearance on the talk show, Palance explained that he had initially been very excited about taking the role of the main villain because the original script contained 3 substantial scenes where he would act directly opposite Sylvester Stallone. The prospect of working closely with one of Hollywood's biggest action stars was part of what attracted the veteran actor to the project, as it promised to give him significant screen time and meaningful interactions with the film's lead character. However, Palance revealed that once filming actually began, all of his planned scenes with Stallone were mysteriously cut from the shooting schedule, leaving him without any direct contact with the movie's star throughout the entire production process. This meant that despite being cast as the primary antagonist in a Stallone vehicle, Palance never actually got the chance to work face-to-face with the actor he was supposed to be battling against on screen. Palance described his experience with a mixture of humor and disappointment, explaining that he spent weeks on the set filming his villainous scenes but never even encountered Stallone in person during the making of the movie. This unusual situation was likely the result of the production's troubled scheduling and the constant script rewrites that plagued the filming process, forcing the actors to work around an ever-changing shooting plan. The fact that Palance chose to discuss this experience publicly on national television demonstrates how unusual and frustrating his involvement in the film had been, especially for an actor of his stature who was accustomed to more organized and professional film productions throughout his long Hollywood career. Fact 10. No official soundtrack was ever released. Despite being a major studio release with several popular songs featured throughout the film, Tango Cash never received an official soundtrack album when it was released in theaters in 1989. This unusual decision was made because all of the songs used in the movie were already available on the individual artists' existing albums, making Warner Brothers feel that there was no need to create a separate compilation for the film. During the late 1980s, movie soundtracks had become big business for record labels, with successful albums from films like Top Gun, Footloose, and Dirty Dancing proving that the right collection of songs could sell millions of copies and extend a movie's commercial life well beyond its theatrical run. However, the music licensing situation for Tango Cash was different from these other films because the producers had chosen to use existing recordings rather than commissioning new songs specifically for the movie. The film featured songs from established artists like Bad English, whose track was already available on their current album through CBS Records, making it unnecessary to repackage the same material for a movie tie-in release. This approach saved the studio money on music licensing and production costs, but it also meant that fans who wanted to own the music from the film had to purchase multiple separate albums, rather than getting everything in one convenient package. Even more surprisingly, Harold Faltermeyer's original musical score for the film also went unreleased for many years. Despite Faltermeyer being the composer behind some of the most memorable movie music of the decade, including his work on Beverly Hills Cop and Top Gun, the instrumental score that provided the dramatic and action-packed musical backdrop for the film's chase scenes and emotional moments remained unavailable to fans for nearly 2 decades. It wasn't until January 30th, 2007, that La La Land Records finally released Faltermeyer's complete score in a limited edition run of only 3,000 copies. This specialty release catered to film music collectors who had been waiting years to hear the full orchestral compositions that had accompanied Stallone and Russell's on-screen adventures, finally giving the movie's music the proper treatment it had deserved since its original theatrical release. Fact 11. Crew called it the worst production ever. An experienced crew member who worked on Tango Cash later gave a brutally honest assessment of the production, describing it as the worst organized, most poorly prepared film I've ever been on in my life, and adding that, from the first day we started, no one knew what the hell anyone was doing. This harsh evaluation came from someone who had worked on numerous Hollywood productions and understood what normal filmmaking was supposed to look like. The crew members' criticism focused particularly on the impossible scheduling demands that had been placed on the production from the very beginning, explaining that the studio was essentially trying to complete what should have been a 22-week movie in just 11 weeks. This unrealistic timeline created a domino effect of problems that affected every aspect of the filming process, from pre-production planning to daily shooting schedules to post-production work. The compressed schedule meant that scenes which should have been allocated 3 days of filming time were being rushed through in a single day, leaving no room for the careful preparation and multiple takes that complex action sequences typically require. This time, crunch put enormous pressure on everyone involved, from the actors who had to learn their lines and blocking quickly to the technical crew who had to set up elaborate stunts and special effects without adequate preparation time. The scheduling problems were made worse by the constant script rewrites that were happening throughout filming, which meant that crew members often arrived at work each morning without knowing exactly what scenes they would be shooting or what equipment they would need. This lack of advanced planning created chaos on set as departments scrambled to adapt to last-minute changes while still trying to maintain the professional standards expected on a major studio film. The crew members' assessment provides insight into why so many other problems plagued the production, from the firing of multiple directors to the budget overruns that eventually reached $20 million beyond the original estimate. When the basic organizational structure of a film production breaks down, it creates a cascade of issues that affect every other aspect of the movie-making process, explaining why Tango Cash became such a legendary example of Hollywood chaos. Fact 12. Stallone held the chaos together. Despite being directly involved in some of the production's most controversial decisions, including firing cinematographers and playing a role in the original director's dismissal, Sylvester Stallone was paradoxically praised by multiple cast and crew members as the one person who managed to hold the chaotic production together. Both director Andrei Konchalovsky and actor Brion James publicly credited Stallone as being a constant voice of reason during what had become an increasingly disorganized and unpredictable filming process. Konchalovsky, even after being fired from the project, had nothing but praise for Stallone's professionalism and leadership during the crisis, acknowledging that the actor had become far more than just the star of the movie. According to Konchalovsky's later interviews, by the end of principal photography, Stallone was unofficially serving as producer, director, and writer simultaneously, taking on responsibilities that went far beyond what any actor would normally be expected to handle during a film production. Brion James echoed these sentiments, explaining that despite Stallone's reputation for being demanding and controlling on set, he was actually the stabilizing force that prevented the entire production from completely falling apart. James noted that Stallone's deep understanding of action filmmaking and his experience with large-budget productions made him uniquely qualified to step into these additional roles when the official leadership structure began to break down. The actor's expanded responsibilities included making crucial creative decisions about script changes, overseeing complex action sequences, and coordinating between different departments when communication between the official producers and crew members became strained. Stallone's hands-on approach meant that he was often working 18-hour days, not just performing his scenes as Ray Tango but also solving logistical problems and mediating conflicts between various cast and crew members. Konchalovsky believed that producer John Peters would have fired him much earlier in the process if Stallone hadn't intervened on his behalf multiple times, demonstrating that even while the actor was making controversial personnel decisions, he was also working behind the scenes to maintain some level of stability and protect the people he felt were essential to completing the film successfully. Fact 13. Newspaper props tell the entire plot. Tango Cash relies heavily on newspaper clippings to advance its story, using at least 5 different fake newspaper headlines within the first 30 minutes of the film to help audiences keep track of the rapidly moving plot. This unusual storytelling technique essentially turns the movie into a series of newspaper reports come to life, with each major story development being announced through dramatic headlines that appear on screen between action sequences. The film opens by establishing both main characters through newspaper coverage of their individual police work, showing how their success as rival cops has made them local celebrities whose exploits are regularly featured in the Los Angeles press. These early newspaper shots introduce audiences to Ray Tango and Gabriel Cash without requiring lengthy exposition scenes, instead letting the headlines and accompanying photos tell viewers everything they need to know about the characters' backgrounds and reputations. As the story progresses, additional newspaper clippings announce major plot developments like the frame-up that sends both cops to prison, their dramatic escape, and their pursuit of the real villains behind the conspiracy. This approach allows the filmmakers to skip over potentially complicated explanations and jump directly from one major story beat to the next, maintaining the movie's fast pace while keeping audiences informed about important developments. However, a closer examination of these newspaper props reveals a telling detail about the rushed nature of the production. The body copy of the articles doesn't actually match the bold headlines that appear above them. While the headlines announce dramatic developments in the Tango Cash story, the smaller text below often contains completely unrelated content, suggesting that the props department was working so quickly that they didn't have time to create proper matching articles for each newspaper. This mismatch between headlines and article text serves as a perfect metaphor for the entire production, where the surface elements look professional and exciting, while the underlying details revealed the chaos and time pressures that were affecting every aspect of the filmmaking process. Most viewers would never notice this inconsistency during a normal viewing, but it provides evidence of just how rushed and improvised many elements of the production had become. Fact 14. Terry Hatcher was recast for family resemblance. Terry Hatcher was not the original choice to play Catherine, Tango's sister and Cash's love interest, as that role was initially given to actress Daphne Ashbrook before a script change led to a complete recasting of the character. The switch happened when the filmmakers decided to alter Catherine's relationship to Ray Tango from what had originally been written as an adopted sister or foster child relationship to making her his actual biological sister. Ashbrook, who was known for her work in television and would later appear in projects like Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, had already been cast and was preparing for the role when the script revision occurred. The original character concept allowed for more flexibility in casting, since there was no need for the actress to bear any physical resemblance to Sylvester Stallone, making Ashbrook's casting perfectly reasonable for the foster child or adoptive family storyline. However, once the decision was made to make Catherine Tango's biological sister, the producers felt they needed an actress who could believably be related to Stallone through genetics rather than just family circumstances. This change in the character's background meant that physical resemblance became an important casting consideration, leading them to search for someone who shared similar facial features or coloring with their leading man. Terry Hatcher was chosen as Ashbrook's replacement specifically because the casting directors and filmmakers felt she had enough of a physical resemblance to Stallone to make their sibling relationship believable on screen. While the resemblance was subtle rather than striking, Hatcher's facial structure and overall appearance were considered close enough to suggest a family connection that would satisfy audiences who might otherwise question the biological relationship. This recasting decision gave Hatcher one of her earliest significant film roles, coming several years before she would become widely known for playing Lois Lane in the television series Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman. The role also established her ability to handle both dramatic scenes and action sequences, skills that would serve her well throughout her later career in both television and film projects. The change demonstrates how script revisions during production can have major consequences for casting decisions, sometimes leading to opportunities for new actors, while unfortunately displacing others who had already been hired for roles. Fact 15. The film ends with anti-critic message. Tango Cash concludes with one final newspaper clipping that contains a direct message aimed at film critics, featuring the headline, "Ask not what the critics say," as the movie's last visual element before the credits roll. This unusual ending represents a preemptive strike against the negative reviews that the filmmakers clearly expected their chaotic buddy cop movie to receive from professional film critics. The newspaper prop appears alongside the traditional heroic image of Tango and Cash posing together after their victory over the villains, but the anti-critic headline reveals the producers' awareness that their troubled production had resulted in a film that was unlikely to win over serious movie reviewers. Rather than simply hoping for the best, they chose to acknowledge this reality while simultaneously dismissing the importance of critical opinion. The phrase itself plays on President John F. Kennedy's famous inaugural address line, "Ask not what your country can do for you," transforming the patriotic call to service into a defiant statement about ignoring professional film criticism. This clever wordplay suggests that the filmmakers wanted audiences to judge the movie for themselves, rather than being influenced by what they anticipated would be harsh reviews from newspaper and magazine critics. This closing message reflects the broader attitude that many action movie producers had during the late 1980s, when big-budget spectacles were often dismissed by critics as mindless entertainment, even when they proved popular with general audiences. The filmmakers behind Tango Cash were essentially telling viewers that critical opinions shouldn't matter as much as personal enjoyment and box office success. The decision to end the movie with this anti-establishment message demonstrates a level of self-awareness about the film's likely reception that was unusual for major studio releases of the era. Most movies would simply hope for positive reviews rather than actively encouraging audiences to ignore them, making this closing statement a bold and somewhat rebellious choice. The anti-critic headline proved to be remarkably prescient, as Tango Cash did indeed receive mostly negative reviews from professional critics while still managing to earn over $120 million worldwide. suggesting that the filmmakers understood their target audience better than the critics did.